Is this a good base? That's a pretty common question in Project Zomboid. And while there are objectively bad locations to set up in, there's quite a lot of factors involved in making a location good. And different people are going to value them differently, especially when playing with a diverse range of sandbox settings or mods. Rather than just point out some good bases, though I might do that later, let's instead go over the factors that I consider when judging a potential base. And to be clear, when I'm talking about a base, I'm talking about something that you're going to use for the long haul. This isn't a safe house or an outpost, this is your main base. Zombie respawn. This is either the most important or a fairly unimportant decision depending on your sandbox settings. Essentially, you've got to ask yourself, am I okay with my base being constantly under siege? If you've got some combination of a fast respawn rate, a high respawn amount, or a low respawn delay, you're going to have fresh zombies wandering into the area all the time. Even if you've got respawn completely off, a really densely populated area is going to feel like it's respawning for a long, long time, as neighboring groups of zombies spread out to fill the gaps you're leaving. With judicious tweaking of the sandbox settings, you can make most places more livable, but even on quite brutal respawn settings, if you set up in some of the vast, empty regions of Kentucky, you're going to be fine. Some people, sometimes, are going to want to feel under siege, but in my experience, most people, almost all of the time, do not. If your base is going to be under constant attack by zombies, then it's probably a bad base. Natural defenses. This obviously needs to be considered along with the zombie respawn in your area. A rural base outside of a respawn zone doesn't need top tier natural defenses, such as indestructible tall wire fences surrounding your potential base. When you do inevitably decide to build a wall around your farm, it's mostly for peace of mind and for something to do. On the other hand, if the area is hot, then some existing defense can make things much more manageable. Mods and sandbox settings change this up quite dramatically, of course. If you're playing with sprinters that can climb tall fences, that's going to suddenly make a lot of formerly defensive locations look and feel rather pointless. If, on the other hand, you've set player construction to be indestructible, then you can build S-tier defenses wherever you want, and you don't need to be constrained by natural defenses at all. Road access. If the logical solution to avoiding a zombie horde is to flee to the countryside, this is just the first of many counterbalances. Note well that I'm talking not so much about where your base is, we'll get to that later, but simply how easily one can drive from your base to the nearest good road. Consider your answer, then consider what it will be like once you've lived long enough to max out the erosion settings. What was a manageable dirt path to your cool, secluded base will, over time, become a tangle of fresh trees impeding your path. While you can chop these down, and even hammer down planks to stop them regrowing, for most people, carving out a 4-tile wide by 800-tile long road is not at all desirable. So in my mind, if your base is not going to have an ongoing, easy access to a road, then it is almost certainly a bad base. Access to loot. Now to look at location more broadly, how close is your base to the sorts of places you're going to want to visit? A good base might be one that is more centrally located on the map, giving you more convenient access to more areas, or you might prefer to set up near or even within one of the larger towns, trusting it's going to provide you with all you need for a very long time. This is a balancing act. In my ongoing series, I've been set up near the very western edge of the map for going on 2+ years now, in an area that would not score highly on access to loot. This is why I've covered this after road access, as I feel it's far more manageable to take a long drive in a town now and then than have to walk a mile through the woods just to get to your car. This can be further mitigated by having access to vehicles with significant hauling capacity. All things being equal, it would be better to have a base closer to good looting options, and a base that lacks that really ought to compensate by being more desirable in other categories. Sticking with location and your access to various things, let's get into some more specifics. Gas. While you don't strictly need gas to live for 10 years in Project Zomboid, just shoveling cabbages in your mouth in the dark, most people are going to want to have access to it. Gas gives you artificial light in your base, it lets you refrigerate and freeze food, and it lets you keep your vehicles running. You could set up near or even in a gas station, or you can be prepared to make a road trip every now and again to stockpile gas. Keep in mind that if you're going to make infrequent trips to a gas station, then your respawn settings could see it completely overrun with zombies every time you arrive, which isn't ideal. Even if you use a solar power mod, your car still runs on gas, so you're likely to want it regardless. Access to a well. You can drink straight from a well and keep all your crops watered year round without ever needing to build a single rain collector. This seems like a big deal, but the thing is, you can just build a bunch of rain collectors and learn to plumb a sink, and suddenly the well isn't that big of a deal, and certainly not worth locking you into the few spots on the map that have a well. It can be fun to set up by a well one time, but in general, I think it's a trap. Access to a body of water. This is actually much more useful than being near a well. You can bucket the water right onto your plants, though you do have to boil it or set up a plumb sink to safely drink it. More importantly, you can fish in a body of water. Fishing is fairly painless to level, so long as you do so before winter starts. Once you're an expert, even just an hour or two of fishing will more than keep you fed for a day. More importantly, fish does wonders to get your weight back up if you've let it drop down too far. While it isn't mandatory to set up by a body of water, if you're building your own base, I'd definitely be asking why you aren't near a body of water, and the trade-off better be good. Availability of foraging zones. Foraging has its uses, whether you're looking for a snack, some medicine, or chipped stones to make some shoddy axes. Each foraging zone will give you access to its own set of resources. Most importantly, there are, as of this moment, areas of the map that are not flagged as being any sort of foraging zone. If you set up in one of these dead zones, you're going to miss out on being able to forage around your base. Access to trees. As much as I hate trees, construction in Project Zomboid is still largely wood-based. Especially if you're building your own base from scratch, it'd be really weird to try to do it somewhere without a ready access to trees. If you're based up within a town, or especially LV, then you're less likely to be constructing your own base anyway, and your building requirements can be largely met by deconstructing furniture for resources. Somewhere unique. Now we're moving into the more subjective options. If you really want to set up in a 5th story penthouse, then not setting up in a 5th story penthouse just won't cut it. Maybe you want a base in a rail yard, or you want to build a town in the middle of a baseball stadium. You might want a base that really has the feel of a farm. Secret graveyard base, conquer the mall, or the prison. In all cases, you're going to have to judge what you will be missing out on for your dream home. Of all the options I've discussed above, the only two I would really try to avoid is setting up shop in the middle of a constant battlefield and settling somewhere without easy road access. Somewhere new. This is just a reminder for the people who insist on settling in the North Muldrow warehouse or the Rosewood fire station. Sometimes the very best base is the one you've never lived in before.